Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. This is Jeff Downs, and thanks for joining us here. About a week late compared to when we originally planned on having this, but thanks for bearing with me and coming back this week to join us for the webinar. We've got a pretty good webinar today. I don't know that it's going to take the full hour. We might only have about 30 minutes of content and then plenty of time for Q&A as we get into it. But for those of you that don't know me, my name is Jeff Downs. I'm a solutions architect at Tasktop Technologies. I'm also the software lifecycle integration SIG leader for Vivid. I've been at Tasktop for about 4 years, and before that, I was actually an HPE ALM tool user and tool owner at LexisNexis. I held a variety of different test-related roles while I was there, from manual testing, functional testing for waterfall teams, agile teams, but the majority of the time I was there was mostly focused around HPE ALM and a lot of the HPE test management tools. For those of you that aren't familiar with the software lifecycle integration SIG, I would definitely encourage you to get registered. We've got a lot of great content that we've been putting out. A lot of the content has been very popular amongst the community, but really we're focused on software lifecycle integration, how we can connect those HP-related tools to all of the third-party tools that exist in your tool stacks, tying your testers to developers, operations, and then requirements analysts and project managers. We've got a couple housekeeping tips here before we get started. So today is a live session, and it's intended for all Vivid members. The recording will be posted in the webinar section on the Vivid website, and that's also visible for all members. Additionally, today's slide deck and webinar recording will be made available to you. We'll send you the link via email once they are posted to the Vivid website. The final point here on this particular slide is that, and this is especially important once we get to the demo portion of today's webinar, but to enlarge the presentation pane on your screen, just click on the click on the rectangle in the upper right-hand corner of the presentation that's being pointed to by the red arrow. Like I said earlier, we'll have plenty of time for Q&A as we go along. If you have questions as we go, please type them in using the Q&A pane on the left-hand side of the screen. Simply type in your question and then click on the Ask button. To ask a question or receive them in your native language, click on the flag in the upper left corner of the screen, which will launch a language selector box. Next, click on the radio button next to your language and then click on Apply, and you are all set. I think that's all for the housekeeping, so let's go ahead and get started. A lot of you that have been using HPE ALM specifically over the years are probably familiar with a variety of different integration offerings from HP and this integration landscape. I think probably the most popular here is going to be HP Synchronizer. I'm imagining a lot of people tried HP Synchronizer at one point. There's also the HPE Next-Gen Synchronizer, which connects HPE ALM or Quality Center with HPE Agile Manager. Well, if I can get my slide to build here. All right. Seems that my screen share might have frozen up a little bit here. Let me try to see if I can get that back. Try to jump ahead to another slide.
I can advance it for you, Jeff, if you want.
Okay, give it a shot and see if you're able to.
That's what you wanted to see, right? The ALM and Synchronizer? Do you see
Yeah,
that?
maybe it's just my browser. I'm seeing kind of the partially built out slide. Let me refresh my browser quick, and we'll see if that takes care of it. Sorry for the technical difficulties. It's been kind of a common theme here with this particular webinar. All right, let me try that again. There we go. Okay. Terry, did you just see the ALM Octane logo pop up?
I sure did.
Perfect.
Yep.
Okay, so continuing along, there's also an HPE Octane Synchronizer, which offers a synchronization between ALM Octane and HPE ALM and Quality Center. But what we're going to be talking about today is HPE ALM Octane IO. And what that does is that actually offers integration to third-party Agile solutions such as Jira, TFS, CA Agile Central, or Rally, and version 1. So essentially what this does is it gives you the ability to make HP ALM or HP ALM Octane really the center of your tool universe. You're able to put that in the middle and flow different artifacts such as requirements, epics, and stories, defects back and forth between the various systems. You can even get into a little bit of moving test cases back and forth between these tools if you have Agile teams that are building out kind of high-level shells of tests and you want to get them into your centralized test management solution. So some of you are probably wondering, isn't that basically just HPE Synchronizer? There are a couple of key differences here. First of all, it's going to be different connectors or different integrations. HPE Synchronizer and Octane IO both support integrations with Jira and TFS, but Octane IO also includes version 1 and CA Agile Central. Another difference on that front is basically how it supports those integrations and what's available for those different tools. All of the versions of Jira, TFS version 1 and Rally or CA Agile Central that are supported by those vendors will be supported by the Octane IO integration. It's going to support both cloud and on-prem deployments of not only the 4 Agile tools that you see here, but of HP ALM as well. And based on that, you can probably guess that it's been built on a different technology as well. HPE ALM Octane IO is built on Tasktop Integration Hub. So it's built on enterprise-grade integration technology that has been proven out in very large customer environments and customer deployments, which means with the final bullet here that it has a different support model. From what I've heard with HPE Synchronizer, it was never formally supported by HPE, but rather it was more of a community-supported solution where you could go on the message boards or discussion boards and ask questions, and hopefully somebody from the community could help you out with the Octane IO integration. That's going to be supported by HPE's support organization, with Tasktop helping for any escalations of support tickets that might occur. So at this point, we're going to get into a couple of use cases. We're going to show a demo of the integration actually working, and then we're going to talk a little bit about how you set it up, how you configure it, how you maintain it, and so forth. So we're going to start in one of the 4 Agile tools. In the demo, it's actually Jira, and we have our HPE tool as well. And we're going to create epics and stories and break those down, and we're going to continue through the software development process. Maybe we'll build out some test cases. Ultimately, we're going to discover defects and have those defects flow back into our Agile tool and maintain all of these relationships between the different artifacts as we go. All right, so let me see if we can flip over to the demonstration here. Okay, Terry, if you could confirm that you can see the screen.
Yeah, you're going to need to launch screen share since you had to refresh. Just click on the launch screen share, or I can do that for you.
I got it.
All right.
Now
Yeah,
we can see the screen.
Yep,
Perfect.
absolutely.
So the first part of the demo here is going to be focused on the end user experience, if you will. What you're going to get, what your end users are going to see with the integration running. Probably one of the first things you'll notice is that the integration runs in a near real time. I think HP Synchronizer had kind of a minimum interval that you could do of 5 minutes, but a lot of times it was more of a batch-driven type of integration. So this is going to be a real-time flow of information back and forth between the systems. But I'm going to start in Jira. I'll create a new epic. So we've got an epic for users needing to authenticate. And then I'll open up that, and I'm going to add a couple of user stories as children of this particular epic. So we have an ID password authentication. And we're going to add some detail here. And we'll create one more while we're at it. Maybe we'll create one more. There we go. And the second one is just very basic single sign-on authentication. So if I navigate back to my authentication epic here, I now have two children, two child user stories. And then if I jump into HPE ALM and I refresh my browser over here, my HPE ALM instance, I now have that authentication epic that's been created. We've maintained the child stories as well over here. For right now, I just created these as a business requirement and functional requirements in HPE ALM. You can really choose any requirement type, whether it's an out-of-the-box or a custom requirement type that you have in your HP ALM environment. So there are a couple of different things that I've done here. One thing is we actually brought across the URLs. This gives us some elements of not only traceability between the parent and children here, but traceability back to our Agile tool by being able to actually just click on a link and have that pop you into Jira or whatever other tool that you might have. All right, I'm not going to wait for that to load. The other thing we've done is we've brought across a lot of the different details as we've defined in our integration mapping or integration definition. So we've set these to very high. We've got our rich text formatting that was maintained. But now we can start to interact back and forth between the two different systems. And we'll ask a question, see if they could maybe provide some design here. And then if we come back into Jira and open up this particular user story, and give this comment a second to come through. There we go. We've got the comment from our user in HP ALM. So at the request of the tester, I don't have an actual design file, but I'll attach a log file and let that synchronize back across into our HP ALM requirement. So once we've gone back and forth a couple of times here, maybe we'll do one more thing. Maybe the development's actually going to start working on this now. And so we can see the updated dev status in HPE ALM, and then if I look at my attachments, I can see that that log file has also come across. So now that the testers can actually start building out and writing test cases and linking, providing traceability between the user story and the test case, come in here to my test coverage. We'll select a test case, just a generic one. I'm not entirely sure what this particular test is. So there are a couple of different things that are going to happen now. Our direct cover status is going to be updated from not covered to failed because that particular test case is failing. But we're also synchronizing those details, those direct cover status details, back into Jira or our Agile tool. So as a lot of you probably know, direct cover status is kind of a system field that's automatically updated anytime you run test cases in HPE ALM. It gives you an indication from a requirement perspective whether all of your tests are passing or failing as it pertains to that individual requirement. So we can start bringing those details back into our Agile tools so that our Scrum Masters or our iteration managers are able to look at this and see the details of the user story and understand kind of its status as it pertains to the testing effort. We've also got the requirement ID from HPE ALM that we're bringing back into Jira. Again, similar to how we put the Jira URL into ALM, we're putting the ALM ID into Jira. So just a couple of different ways that you can kind of solve that traceability challenge that you might have. But we're going to go ahead and actually update this user story or this requirement now that the testing effort has started. I'm sure nobody ever deals with changing requirements as you're into your testing activities. So we'll say, let's change this to a should. So one thing I talk about a lot with different companies as we're kind of walking through what they want an integration solution to look like is not only how do you set up the integration to meet your needs, but how can you tie all of your different tools together to really meet your needs. So one thing from an ALM perspective is with this integration now running, it gives you the ability to start to leverage maybe some functionality that you have been paying for years in HPE ALM, but you haven't ever really been able to take advantage of. Maybe you have people that are manually importing requirements into HPE ALM. Maybe you're not using the requirements module at all. But now that you have this live real-time integration running and you're getting all of these requirements into ALM, now you can start to do things like enable alerts so that when I tie a test case back to a requirement and the requirement actually changes in Jira or in your Agile tool, HPE ALM will alert the tester and say, hey, you might want to take a look at this particular test case because the underlying requirements have changed and you'll want to go in and double check and make sure that the test case is still valid. All right, so that's what I have set up for the actual integration now. I'm going to transition into how the integration is set up and configured and look at this from an administrative perspective. So the admin UI for the integrations, let me blow this up a little bit for you so you can see it more easily. All right, let's try that. All right. So the integrations are configured via the Desktop Integration Hub UI. I'm not entirely sure if HPE has white labeled this and put the HPE ALM Octane IO branding on it, but it's going to be the same interface, the same configuration either way. So what this gives you the ability to do is your tool admins. A lot of times we see this being the HPE ALM admin is responsible for setting up and configuring and maintaining these integrations. Right now, I just have my HPE ALM connected to my Jira. But like I said, with this particular offering, you get ALM or Octane, and you get Jira TFS version 1 and CA Agile Central. And if I blow up this diagram a little bit more, I can now see that I've got features and epics connected, features and stories connected between the two systems. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through kind of the building blocks of this integration first and show you how it's set up. And then I'm going to go back. I'm actually going to create the defect integration, and we'll go ahead and kick that off and run it as well. So the integration connects to each of these systems via web services. There's no clients or add-ons or plugins or anything like that that's going to be required in your HP tools or in any of the other tools that you're going to be connecting. It's going to require a URL as well as an ID and password that you would use to connect just as if you were any other normal user. The integrations are built around the idea of a model. So say, for example, you have HPE ALM and Jira, but then you also have some Microsoft.NET developers in-house as well. They use TFS. Rather than doing a bunch of point-to-point mappings between all of these different systems, we're going to give you this centralized model. It's basically a common language that all of the different tools will speak to and transform their data to. So if I come down here, you're going to get a lot of different out-of-the-box models available to you. This kind of gives you the ability to jump into this and kind of get a quick start into your integration. A model is effectively just defining in the integration tool the different fields that you want to flow in your integration. So I've got summaries, descriptions. I've got types for each one of those fields, lookup values where necessary. But this smart field is really a key piece of the integration as well. This is what allows TaskCop to, rather than kind of giving you a blank slate and saying, you know, good luck, you can build anything, we're taking what we've learned over the years and we're going to automatically map as much as we can for you in these integrations and then let you fine-tune it. So what these smart fields do is it allows us to map summary fields to summary fields, even if one system calls it a name and another system calls it a title and another system calls the field a short description. Contextually or conceptually, those are all the same field between the various systems, even though they're called different things. Once we have the models, and like I said, those can either be used as out-of-the-box models that are provided for you, or you can tweak those models as you see fit. But then it becomes a matter of building different collections. And this really has a lot to do with how you start to scale your integrations. So I'm mapping business requirements and functional requirements on the HP side to my model. On the Jira side, I'm mapping epics and stories to my models. And I already have a bug collection that I've created as well. But if I drill into this, we'll see there are a couple of key aspects of the collections as they pertain to the mapping and the scaling. I'm actually going to start with the field mapping first. So if I drill in here, this is where a lot of that automatic mapping that I talked about is happening. Just about all of these fields were automatically mapped except for this first one and the last two down here. So all of this in the middle was automatically mapped using the smart fields that I mentioned a moment ago. And really, you can see a couple examples of that here where we have author being automatically mapped to created by, because those fields are fundamentally the same thing, even though they're called something different. But it's just a matter of selecting, you know, your different fields from HPE ALM and then mapping it to a field in your, it's not really a valid mapping, but mapping it to a field in your model and then clicking connect. If you have additional configuration that you need to do, say maybe for priority, where we have list values of, we can reconcile those differences as well so that you can map one low to low, or you can map whatever the Jira values are, the TFS values into your model values. So it gives you the ability to just reconcile a lot of the differences between the different tools. And then the second aspect of the collection, and this is really all about being able to scale, is having additional projects participate in these collections. And I'll show you more about this in a second when we build out the defect integration. So we'll go ahead and clear that out, cancel all these changes. So since we're in here, I'm going to go ahead and build my HPE ALM defect collection. Give it a name, and I'm going to choose the connection that we created up here in our repository area. And in this particular integration, or this particular collection, excuse me, I'm actually going to add 2 projects to my collection. Once I've added those, it's going to give me a list of the possible types that are available in these HPE ALM projects. So I'll choose defect, and I'm going to map that to the defect model. And I'll save these changes. Once I've done that, I can see that 11 of the fields were automatically mapped for me based on the smart fields. And then if I come in here, once we finish loading, I can see I've got warnings here that additional configuration is needed for some of these lookup list type fields. So if I come in here, actually reconciling the differences is pretty straightforward. I just select the options on both sides and then connect them. And in this case, I have a different number of options available. So I'm actually going to, if I'm going from left to right, I'm going to take either of these values and map it to Sev1. And then I'll see when I actually connect these, if I'm going from right to left, I actually have the choice of what I want to create on the left side. So I'm going to make 4 very high, my default option there. And then I also need to handle the scenario where I'm not getting a severity value. I've got an empty field here, so I'm going to map that to low also, and we'll make that change. And then I'll just go through and I'll do the priority quickly. And again, this is going to be a one-time activity of creating this collection that maps ALM defects to our defect model. And then it doesn't matter if I'm building an integration with Jira or building an integration with TFS or version 1 or CA Agile Central, I'm going to reuse this collection. And rather than going in and configuring another one of those, I'll just delete status out of the list here. We'll take a peek in here, confirm that I don't have any additional required fields. And then I'll just add one more field to my mapping here. And this is the mapping that's going to take the URL for my Jira defect and create a URL attachment in HPE ALM. So now that I've done that, I've got my defect collection created. So I can continue on into the integration. So integration is actually where you're going to select multiple collections. Once again, I just have epics and stories integrations running right now, but I can create a new one of these. It's going to be a synchronization. We'll call it our defect sync. And then over here, it's just a matter of choosing which collection you want to be on the left side of your integration, which collection you want to be on your right side of the integration. It doesn't really matter which one you put on the left and which one you put on the right. But now, since we've done all of the mapping work, it's really all about defining how you want this particular integration to work, how you want these 2 collections to work together. So I can start in here and I can say, well, HPE ALM, my testers are the source of truth for my defects. So I only want to do OneWay Creation. I don't want defects created in Jira to flow into my ALM environment. So I'm going to select the second style here and do OneWay Creation from left to right. On the field flow, what this does is this shows you There's a lot going on this screen, but this shows you how my ALM fields mapped to my model and my Jira fields mapped to my model will flow back and forth in the context of this integration. So we can actually make changes at the field level to make these a one-way integration or a two-way integration. Or if for some particular reason you want to only update this field when the artifact is created and then we're never going to change the priority in Jira ever again, you can do that. So there are a lot of different options here that you can configure at the field level. And of course, we can see some of these fields where we don't have values mapped to our model in this particular view as well. Artifact routing is really a key piece here. So this is how we take the multiple projects that are participating in our collections, and it's really all about defining how things flow back and forth between the systems. So in this case, I'm going to take everything from either one of my HPE projects, and I'm going to write them into a single Jira project. If I were to actually make one quick change here, since we've got plenty of time, we'll do a couple more things on the fly. And say I want to come in here and add a second project to my Jira collection. Save that. And now if I come back here, let me make sure I save that. All right, well, it doesn't want to show up. That's what I get for trying to do more here. Let me just reload my entire screen. All right, there we go. So I will add all of those, and what I was trying to show the first time around is kind of the other scenario where I'm going from one HP project. This is actually a much more common scenario, especially between HP, ALM, and a lot of the Agile tools. So I've got one large HP project that's going to map to multiple Jira projects, and what I can do is actually, TaskTop is going to require me to provide additional configuration at this point, because it needs to know how to decide when to send a defect to Jira's first project versus when to send a defect to Jira's second project. So I don't have any great fields to make that decision on, so we'll just use severity as an example. But what I can do is say maybe the project one in Jira is made up of a lot of our best and brightest engineers, and so we're going to send them all of the high severity defects, and then we're going to send the lowest severity defects to our engineers that are in project 2 in Jira. And then down here you can control whether you want to error or ignore, or maybe even provide a default route if there's actually an issue or something that doesn't match one of these conditions. The next piece, oops, go back here. The next piece is artifact filtering. So a lot of times people don't always want everything to synchronize all the time. So this gives you the ability to say, I want this synchronization to run when status does not equal new. So it has to come out of that new status before I actually want it to synchronize between the two tools, maybe because I have a triage meeting that occurs every morning where we go through these new defects that were discovered and see what's valid and see what's not. And I'm actually going to clear this one out. I don't want to use a filter right now. And then things like comments and attachments. There are a lot of complexities around comments and attachments, but it's just a matter of toggling those on and off. And then the final piece here that gets configured is how do you want conflicts to be reconciled between the two systems. You can either have that error out so that an administrator has to actually resolve that conflict manually, but a lot of times the preferred solution is to just make one system dominant over the other. So in this case, for defects, I'm going to make ALM my dominant system. For my stories and my epics, I make Jira my dominant system, or my Agile tool my dominant system. So once we've done that, and hopefully I set this all up correctly, we should start to see that a lot of these artifacts are going to start flowing between the systems. And if I did everything right, I've got a whole lot of artifacts in my demo environment here. Those will start coming across between the two tools. So as far as the actual demo, that's really what I have to show today. We'll get into the questions here once we flip back into the slides, because I'm guessing the next question from everyone is going to be, that's great, but where do we get it? So I jump back to my presentation. All right, so first question is, what exactly do we get now that you've seen it? Said multiple times that this is going to be HPE ALM and Octane to any of these 4 Agile tools. So Jira, CA, Agile Central, or Rally, TFS version 1. The license is going to be offered free. It's going to be up to 100 users in the first year, and then it's going to be 50 users from that point forward. So the users are determined essentially by looking at who is creating these artifacts that are being synchronized between the two systems, who's being assigned to work on these artifacts, who's adding comments. It's really the users that are kind of participating in the life cycle of those artifacts as they flow back and forth. As far as support goes, I mentioned earlier that support's going to come from HPE, and if there are any support tickets that HPE is unable to answer, they're going to escalate that to TaskTop and get us involved as needed. One of the key pieces is this last bullet down here at the bottom. I mentioned it briefly earlier, but it's the support for new versions of your tools or SaaS versions of those tools. I know a lot of times that's where people ran into trouble with HP Synchronizer. When I was looking at it years back, it stayed pretty up to date with ALM releases, but it would be a year to a year and a half or sometimes more after a new version of TFS became available before that version of TFS was supported. I know there are some holes in how the SaaS tools are supported with Synchronizer. So this is going to be supported, and new versions of these tools are going to be available constantly, so that it doesn't prevent you from being able to upgrade your endpoint systems because you're waiting on the integration that sits in the middle to be ready for it. And then the last piece here is going to be, where do I get it? So you're going to start by requesting a license. We've got a link here to go and request that license. Even though this is an HPE offering, the license is actually going to be provided by TaskTop. So there's a form that you can fill out there to provide the details of what you need. TaskTop will send you the license, and it will send you details of where to get the download. The download is actually going to come from HPE, so the response with the license you get will have the details on where to go to download the software. And then as far as any questions that you might have, or as you're going through and doing the deployment, there's going to be a lot of documentation, user guides, installation primers, that sort of thing, that are available at docs.tasktop.com. And of course, there's always the HP support that's available to you. And then, of course, our friends in professional services will always be happy to let you know that there are services available through HPE and TaskTop if you want additional support or additional help getting your integration up and running between the two systems. So that brings us to the end of the slides here. It looks like we've got quite a few questions that are sitting in the queue. As I said, this was really focused on kind of the green arrows, connections down here. I'm hoping to be able to do more webinars throughout the remainder of the year that maybe touch on some of these other connections between the various systems as well. So let me see if I can just start working through some of these questions here. All right, so there's one question about additional context on the challenges that it addresses or what problems it solves. So as far as the integration and what it does is it really provides the flow of details or the automated traceability between the different tools that your software development shops are using. It's become commonplace that the testers have one tool that meets their needs, and it's great for managing testing and all aspects of testing, but they're not great agile tools, or they're not great requirements management tools. And the reality of it is there's not just one vendor that can provide best of breed solutions across the entire life cycle. So the integration comes into play where it allows people to use their tool of choice, but connect them behind the scenes so that your people can collaborate with one another. You can get this data flowing between the systems automatically, and really be able to. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Really be able to maintain that traceability between the different systems, even though you're defining, epics and stories in one system, and you're defining tests and defects in another system. Just get those flowing and maintain all of the traceability, especially in highly regulated, highly audited types of industries. They need to be able to show that, this requirement was defined here. It's related to these test cases. Those tests were executed by this tester, and these defects were discovered. All right. Can it be used to interface ALM Octane to ALM Octane.net? And I believe ALM.net is the terminology for just the classic HPE ALM Quality Center. So this particular ALM Octane IO offering does not provide that. From what I'm told, there either is currently or is going to be an HPE Octane Synchronizer that provides that particular integration. I didn't put it on this slide, but I do know that TaskTop offers kind of a free defect-only integration between ALM Octane and ALM.net, so that might be an option as well. But the solution that we talked about today, ALM Octane IO, that does not connect Octane and classic HPE ALM. All right. And I think I sort of touched on this one about when organizations would use two different tools for creating and maintaining user stories. As far as the actual creation and maintenance, I've seen a number of different scenarios. Anywhere from, I think one I mentioned already, where a company is using version 1 or Rally or Jira for a majority of their agile management, but then they have a team that's writing .NET code. And those .NET coders find it much easier to stay in the land of Microsoft with Visual Studio, with TFS, and do all of their work there. So those teams might be using TFS to build and maintain those epics and stories. Another scenario that's pretty common, especially with the larger companies, is mergers and acquisitions. So when you acquire or when you merge with another company, everybody comes to the table with their own set of tools. So one company might be using version 1, another company might be using CA Agile Central, and they're going to keep both of those tool sets in place, at least for a period of time. So there's a couple examples of when you would use different tools for creating and maintaining the same user stories and requirements. All right, so we've got a question about what specifically what specific artifacts are created or supported between these two systems. So I provided the link on the previous screen, and actually, come to think of it, it's not going to be on there. But essentially, it's going to be the work items or the issues between these tools. For the classic HPE ALM or ALM.net or Quality Center, whatever you want to call it, it's going to be requirements, test cases, and defects. And there's a lot of different things you can do with that, especially when you start to get into a lot of the different requirement types. For Jira, it's going to be anything that is an issue, which is pretty much everything in Jira. For TFS, same thing, anything that's a work item, which is pretty much everything in TFS. Rally version 1, it's going to be features, epics, stories, tasks, tests, defects, and I think there are a handful of other ones in there as well. So really, if you look at your use cases as they pertain to these different systems, a lot of the use cases are going to be covered between these various tools to synchronize the work between the two systems. And then I just got a colleague that sent me some details on Octane. Octane is feature, user story, defect, task, test suite, quality story, manual test, automated test, Gherkin test, manual run, run suite, automated run, Gherkin automated run. So there are quite a few for these various systems. There's a lot of different support. It's not going to be what you're used to with Synchronizer, where you kind of see, it works for requirements from this system to this system and defects only from this system to this system. It's a lot more robust of an integration. There's a question about any plans to support RTC as part of the Octane IO offering. I do not know that. I'm not, I do not have an answer for that. But if I can follow up, see if I can find anything. If so, I will let you know. All right, we've got a question here about what happens if there are more than the allocated number of free users. If you exceed that number of users, TaskTop is going to provide warnings. There's going to be a grace period. The administrator is going to see warnings that the license is valid for X number of users. You're using Y number of users, and it's going to provide some details there on what you can do to mitigate that scenario. Is there a relationship linked to the user story and defect in Jira? Great question, and I actually had planned on showing that, but I forgot. Yes, there is a link on the HPE ALM side. It is called linked entities from the defect. From the requirement, it's called linked defects. And then on the Jira side, it's typically the blocks and blocked by relationship that's used. Right. Quite a few more. Let's do a time check. We got about 10 minutes. Does it support HPE Quality Center 12.53? Yes. Can TaskTop also be used to integrate with HPE PPM? The answer is yes, but not via the Octane IO solution, so you would have to contact TaskTop directly for that one. The original HPE Synchronizer for TFS did not support TFS 2017. Does this? Yes, this one does. Actually, generally we ship TFS support simultaneously with when Microsoft rolls out support for those versions. So we definitely stay on top of those. If I currently use the ALM Synchronizer with Jira or TFS, can I import my mappings to the ALM Octane IO? No, you can't import the actual configuration, but a lot of the hard work that comes with implementing an integration will already be done for you. A lot of times, you'll spend more time trying to figure out just how you want this data to flow back and forth between the systems. I want this field to go one way. I want this field to go bidirectionally. You've got all of that you already defined in Synchronizer. So it's going to be just a matter of going through in Octane IO and setting up, making sure your model aligns to that, and then mapping everything to the model. Can the process be controlled by the frequency? Yes. Out of the box, I believe it's 1 minute is the default interval for the integration to run. For the demo, I actually had it running every 3 seconds. But it's not uncommon for companies to run the integrations every 10 seconds or every 20 seconds or 30 seconds and keep it in that near real-time mode. Can we synchronize the comments? Yes, comment fields can be synchronized between all of the different tools. When is an ALM Octane IO license consumed, and can we prevent users from using a license? Basically, what you would do to prevent users from using a license is you would set up your filtering and your collection routing in a way that it would only synchronize the projects that you're interested in synchronizing, or it would only synchronize a subset of defects or user stories, depending on how your users actually. What am I trying to say here? Depending on how your users actually kind of participate in your Jira, your ALM environments, and what they have access to and what they're updating. Can I connect ALM to both Jira and TFS at the same time? Yes, you definitely can, and you can choose whether you want to take whether you want to kind of say, I want this subset of artifacts from ALM to go to Jira and this other subset to go to TFS. You could also set it up in a way so that all of your changes flowed through all of the systems. But there still is the maximum user count there. Will there be a charge after 2 years? From my understanding, at this point, the 50 licenses continues beyond 2 years. Let's see, 6 more minutes. We've got just a couple more questions, so we should be good. See, I really underestimated things when I said it would only take us about 30 minutes or so today. What is the definition of a user, and how are the users counted? So the definition of a user, at least kind of paraphrased from myself, is essentially anyone who is creating an artifact or modifying an artifact, adding a comment to an artifact, potentially in systems like Jira, a watcher to an artifact that is being synchronized back and forth as part of the integration. I've got a question here from Randy about TFS and code management. Could you maybe elaborate a little bit more on that particular question in the Q&A panel, and I'll see if I can answer it for you. And then it looks like the last question we have here is, can this be installed on the same server that HPE ALM is installed, or does it need its own server? The recommendation is that it gets its own server, but technically there's no reason that you can't install it on the same server that you're running HPE ALM on, as long as both systems are appropriately sized and the server can appropriately support both of those tools. So if I think I got all of the questions here. If there's anything that I missed, definitely feel free to throw it in there quick, and I'll try to answer it. I'm going to change the slide here. We've got a quick plug for Protect 2017 that's coming up in Washington, D.C. from September 11th to 13th. So if you're interested in attending, there's a Vivit discount that's available. All right, so I just got a clarification on that last question. Okay, so as far as basically traceability between code in TFS and tests in Octane, I believe what you can do there is as you check in code in TFS, you can tie that commit or that check-in to a work item. One thing you can do is you can actually, when you set up the integration, you can take the URL link from the user story, for example, to that commit and synchronize that URL into Octane or HPE ALM. So that what a user in ALM would see is that there's a story, and now I've got a hyperlink or a URL that if I click it, it'll take me directly to the commit on the TFS side. And then one last question around the user piece. So one thing I forgot to mention is that there is no double counting. So if you have someone that's a user in both ALM and Rally, that person counts as one user from the integration perspective. We're not going to count that person twice. All right, so I think that brings us just about to the end of the webinar here. So I think you'll probably get a survey on the screen. If you can go ahead and do that, provide us feedback, that would be much appreciated. And then here, I'm not sure the time frame with the holidays coming up, but we're going to get this recording out. We're going to get that posted on the Vivit website, and then anyone that attended or registered should also get an email with a link to the slides and to the recording. And with that, we will wrap up. Thank you, everyone, for participating, and we're looking forward to more great SLI SIG webinars in the future. Thank you.